So this is the second part of the event today, and really we're only going to talk together for about 20 minutes or so, but possibly not even for 20 minutes, because I can tell actually in this audience that there are probably lots of questions that people would like to ask, and I think we very much like to involve everybody in this conversation. So that's part of my job really. And my name's Claire Macdonald, and I'm a writer, and my own background is in theatre and performance. And I was thinking earlier on that I've kind of moonlighted a bit in art writing, really. It's not my job. And my first job of moonlighting in 1988 was to write about Cornelia's 30 Pieces of Silver. So I did the catalogue essay for the Icon Gallery. And in fact, today, in the great spirit of relics that we have, I found my own little file with all kinds of information that related to that earlier piece. So that's the kind of history of where we come from. We've known each other for a very long time, probably nigh on 30 years actually, which is I was working out today. But anyway, we won't discuss that really, because that tells you far too much about both of us. But so really what I wanted to do was to just kind of set off and perhaps kind of introduce some more questions, things maybe that we've never talked about before, or things I've never really asked you. And one of those things, in fact, was that came from this little archive here somewhere, and this little relic. Here it is. And in this little folder, which is here is the kind of essay I wrote and all kinds of things, drawings and so on, we found the other night this, Surveying the Scene, which was an exhibition at South Hill Park that you were in 1986. And we were kind of looking at it, and I was thinking about how the statement that Cornelia made then, which I'm actually going to read, whether or not, I think it's a good starting point really to think about, particularly because 30 Pieces of Silver is being shown in St Mary's at the moment, and it is a work that now is 23 years old, I think. Yes. And so in a sense of thinking about, very much related to the kind of work that you do, what is a moment, a span, a life, a death, and all the kinds of things, a relationship of materiality and all this. How does what you said about yourself then really relate to where you are now? So shall I read? Artist Statement, 1986. When I think of the many artists and their work I've been inspired by, I can single out a few that have particular qualities that were triggers in my own development. Christo's Running Fence, Klaus Oldenburg's Proposed Monuments, Kurt Schwitter's Merzbau, is that how we say it? Tatlin's Tower, Richard Long's Walks, and Gaudi's wire and canvas architectural models. What they have in common is an elusive monumentality, only existing in drawn, photographic or model form. They're more like events or pieces of mythology, intended specifically for a chosen location. It's these particular qualities that have helped me to define my own sculptural concerns. And I suppose I'd like to start by asking what that means to you now.
I think it's all still true, actually. I still love all those artists, and I do think, you know, the whole thing about the monument or the anti-monument, because a lot of my works really are anti-monuments. It's very weird doing the Mermaid, because I think, in a way, it's an anti-monument because it's warts and all, and it's kind of, you know, commemorating somebody who's not legendary or famous, or, you know, it's an inverted monument in a way. But yeah, I still think that those works are, you know, the idea of making a walk and that being an artwork.
Well, what does elusive monumentality mean for you? There's kind of it's a really interesting phrase, actually.
Well, I suppose it's more like our lives, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, sculpture, when I first started making sculpture, I was very confused by it. I was starting to do painting because I found sculpture a bit confusing, because I thought most sculpture seemed to be monumental. I mean, until halfway through the 20th century even, you know, the works, Henry Moore, you know, Barbara Hepworth backwards, they all seem to be about the lump, you know, and all about the solid moment.
And the plinth.
And the plinth, and the, you know, they all seem to be about perhaps more phallic-centric things, really. And I found they were fixed forever, and I suppose that's why it's weird doing something like this now, is that I didn't feel like that about life. I felt life's constantly in flux. Things are very, you know, a lot of my work doesn't touch the ground because I feel like we're just passing through, you know, we're always trying to battle with gravity throughout our lives, and then we succumb at the end. And so, in a way, I was always trying to make work that reflected my temporary feel about. But you know, people can be monumental in whatever they do in life. You know, even
well, like Georgina Baker.
Yes,
and in a way, I mean,
she's brilliant.
We start right at the end in a way with that idea of elusive monumentality, because I mean, another thing, little segue was, and I was also thinking you talked a lot in this talk as well about the idea of subconscious intention or subconscious motivation. And again, I'm sort of thinking about the whole lifespan, if you like, of this particular work, just using that work as a frame, 30 pieces of silver, kind of thinking about the idea of a long span of work. And thinking about this new monument, if you like, that you've made, and the idea, first of all, that it's temporary in the sense that it's one day. Just one day. It's not made up as Rodin, for instance, would have done of modelling of years. And Rodin spent years and years with modelling people and then actually casting them. But at the same time, unconsciously, I think it relates to. I was just thinking about. I'd forgotten that you'd made that Rodin piece, which is Rodin and Duchamp, two kind of very interesting artists to kind of relate to one another. But in
both
a way,
French, both around the same time.
Both French, both iconoclastic, both mavericks in many ways. But also this new piece, to me, is a very interesting one because it suddenly relates to the idea of monumentality and also touch.
Yes, I mean this is a monument or an anti-monument in a way. I mean,
an anti-monument in a different way.
Yes, I mean I almost thought it. My original idea thought I might do something that was more like a seaside lady, you know, but that disappeared after a while. But it just wanted something that people could sit on the lap, you know, kids could play, you know, it'd be part of the community. It might not last very long because, but you know, I wanted it to be, you know, something that people can relate to.
Yeah. But the idea of bronze, by the way, though, as a metal is a very lasting. It's the material that sculptors used that did last. Whereas silver, for instance, which you've worked with, has that mercurial.
Well, if I made that in silver, it'd be gone tomorrow.
It
might be gone tomorrow because it's bronze.
We had an interesting conversation yesterday about silver with several antique dealers about the whole notion of the value of silver now, that it's in the weight of the metal and not
rather than the design of the object.
Not in the design of the object.
You know, beautiful objects are getting trashed at the moment because people just melting them down for the silver, which I'm sure has gone on throughout the centuries.
But a question, so I think that's very interesting in terms of thinking about the kind of unconscious. It's almost as if the work has its own drive.
Yes, I quite like, you know, before I had children, I thought, well, if I'm not going to have children, perhaps my work's my children, I'll set them off into the world and see what they do, you know. So the 30 pieces of silver's got its own life. I didn't even know it'd been loaned here, you know. The first time I knew about it, I think when Jennifer, you know, I thought, oh, you know, Tate's loaned out this piece, you know. But it's great in a way because it's almost got its own social life.
What does that mean? Have you thought it becomes a social piece, actually, in a sense. So what does that actually kind of mean to you?
Well, a great deal. I mean, I thought when I made these kind of large-scale works, I didn't really expect them to survive because I thought they're too labour-intensive. They're too, you know what I mean. Who's going to spend all that time putting those works up again? You know, so I thought they were very temporary things. I did them when I needed to make them, and then, you know, they've survived against all odds. I think that's because they were owned by a museum. You know, if they had been owned by a private collector who wanted it for a while, and then they thought, oh, this is too much, and put it in an auction, or, you know, but it is weird, you know, the idea. Now when I make work, I'm thinking, I don't want to have to worry about whether, you know, it's almost like I get responsible for, you know, what I produce, and think, oh, shit, what happens if this becomes permanent or it doesn't, or I don't know. It makes you think as you get older, you know, actually hang on, that this can't just go in a skip, you know. I mean, you know, so in a way it's kind of, before I was doing anything I didn't care about what happened to the work, and a lot of work I made disappeared, you know, it didn't survive. And
well, actually you've also made work that you've worked between, if you like, the hidden and the visible all the time. So I can't remember when it was, but was it in the 80s you made a work which is actually hidden in the walls of a private house?
Yes.
Was that before 30 Pieces of Silver? Was it mid-80s?
Yes, it might be mid-80s.
Yeah, it may have been the mid-80s.
Yeah, so a writer asked me to make a piece of work for his house, and I ended up making which I don't normally do commissions at all, but he was a friend, and so I got all the names of all the people who lived in his house, which had been in many flats, and I got every single name, and I made them in my own handwriting in lead. I cast them, and then they were embedded, because the whole house got changed and new walls were built, and everything got bedded in the walls, and I just photographed them, suspended in the room before they got buried, and that's what he got, was the photographs, really, the works. And I've done a piece more recently which Claire helped me with, called Different Dirt, which is where I bought things on the internet. People go out with metal detectors and they dig up, you know, Roman coins or bits of medieval pottery or whatever, and I I was making a show in New York, and I wanted to do a piece about America and Britain. It was during the 2003.
It was just
the
before
Gulf
the
War.
it was the Gulf War. It was
So I kind of thought, oh God, different dirt came from that. That we were both complicit in something, the Iraq thing. And so I got things that people had picked, so I bought lots of lots on the internet, like Roman coins that were dug up in Cheshire, and then I reburied them in America, in Athens, Georgia. Military buttons dug up
and
here
in my back
were buried in Two for Consequences, New Mexico.
Yeah.
And I had 20 thimbles which are buried on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. I just thought that was clumsy politicians wearing thimbles for some reason. Anyway, and then things in America, like a pain bullet, a bullet from the Vicksburg, Tennessee, that had been dug up in the Civil War relic, was bitten. People used to bite bullets when they were having operations done because in field hospitals and because there was no anaesthetic. So the term to bite the bullet comes from biting on a piece of metal. So I got this bitten bullet, pain bullet. I scanned them all and made on a scanner with today's newspaper behind them, and I made these prints. And then all the objects were buried again, so they were lost again. So the record was just them being above ground. I buried the pain bullet in Freud's garden in